Hello, and welcome to another edition of Ask the Professor, a crowd-funded, crowd-driven feature where we respond to your questions on everything from political philosophy to history to economics to culture, all those things that matter to us in our common life.
All right, here's one from Terry, and he asks, what are the similarities and differences between classical liberals, libertarians, and conservatives? What would they agree about over dinner, and what would they be fighting about?
That's an excellent question. Sometimes it seems that they wouldn't agree about anything and they'd fight constantly. But they have common enemies, so they must have something that they agree on that rubs the other side the wrong way and helps to define which side is which. Loosely speaking, I would say that libertarians are actually very much like classical liberals. The classical liberal agenda associated with people like John Stuart Mill was primarily to remove legal restraints on people's freedom of choice. Mill was a noted political economist. He was one of the classical economists. He would demonstrate how any kind of restriction on freedom of contract would actually reduce wealth and would reduce people's opportunity to better themselves. But at the same time, not often remembered, because Mill is such a straight-laced Victorian character, or so he seems, that he was arrested for distributing birth control literature. Mill was very much what we would consider a libertarian today. In some ways, I think the reason we have libertarians today is that liberalism itself evolved into a big government kind of philosophy. And either people who call themselves classical liberals or libertarians will notice out, stop, thief, that's our word, that's our philosophy. But I say when things like that happen on such a scale, there's a reason for it. And the reason I would put forward is this. Liberalism was originally a move, intellectual, political, cultural, to liberate people. The idea behind much of the thought of, again, men like John Stuart Mill was that humans were held back from achieving their full potential by feudal restrictions on their freedom of economic choice. That sounds terribly reactionary today, but it was quite a radical notion at the time. And this instinct behind liberalism is very much that Rousseauian idea that man is born free but is everywhere in chains, and liberals looked for those chains in economic restraints. And when they by and large succeeded in removing such restraints, but human life wasn't transformed, the New Jerusalem did not come down with walls shining like gold and so on, then liberals, true to their core impulse, started looking for other restraints, and they decided maybe it wasn't government laws restricting economic freedom of choice. Maybe it was economic necessity. Maybe what we needed was a state that made sure that everybody had economic security that would free us from anxiety and alienation and all those bad things that stopped us from being what we're meant to be. When that didn't work, coupled with the discovery of racial injustice in the Western world, especially the United States, especially in the 1960s, liberals thought, okay, maybe the New Deal was all fine and good as far as it went, but the real problem wasn't economic. Maybe our problem is that we were socially isolated and alienated. We were marginalized. And thus liberalism moved on to an aggressive program of making everybody act as though they liked one another and never saying anything that might be misinterpreted or correctly interpreted as rude. And so liberalism became a big government philosophy, leaving behind, in some sense, that group who are now libertarians who are saying, wait a minute, we need to be free to choose. That's how we find our true selves. Now, you notice I haven't said anything about conservatives yet, which is funny, because a lot of conservatives, including me, certainly are libertarian on economics and on some other things as well. But I would put it to you that conservatives are almost the antithesis of liberals. They believe in improving policy. They believe in removing evils from this world, but they do not believe that man is born to be something different, at least on this side of the grave, than what he is now. That this is the human condition, that man is born to trouble as the sparks fly upward, and we shall always have afflictions. We shall always, in some way, not find our true selves. And again, if you're a Christian or other religions, you believe that in an afterlife we shall be purged of sin and we shall really experience what liberals are looking for in this world. But conservatives don't believe it can happen now. And this means that they are opposed to schemes through which government, by compelling us to make certain choices, not others, will make us a lot happier. Thus, we keep company with libertarians and classical liberals on that front. We often part company with them, though not invariably, on national security, because conservatives believe the world is an imperfect place, that war is almost the natural condition of mankind, and that we must always be prepared for disorder that threatens us. And some libertarians and some classical liberals feel that big government is always bad, including national security big government, that it is inefficient, that it is mendacious, that it is power hungry. And the thing is that many conservatives, being more comfortable with imperfection than liberals and libertarians, will agree, yes, there are problems with the national security state, but they are not as bad as the problems of being unable to defend yourself, whether it's against, here he comes again, Adolf Hitler, or ISIL, or whoever may be menacing you, going back to Genghis Khan and before. And so there's a substantial overlap on economic policy among these three groups, but I would put it to you that metaphysically, conservatives and liberals are poles apart. And that's why classical liberalism turned into modern liberalism that is coercive, intolerant, and very much in favor of big government. As for libertarians, they're an interestingly mixed group because you will find libertarian hawks, but you also find libertarians whose views on national security strike me as somewhere between irresponsible and deranged. They just cannot see that the world is a threatening place. And again, that's this very metaphysical intuition. Is the natural condition of mankind want and insecurity and ignorance, or is the natural condition of mankind plenty and peace and enlightenment? That's a very deep intuition. It's the one Thomas Sowell talks about in The Conflict of Visions. And to my way of thinking, it's curious that liberals, classical liberals, libertarians and conservatives agree on as much policy as they do, primarily economic, because they differ on that. And thus they often, though again not invariably, differ widely on social issues as well. You will find pro-life libertarians, but you certainly find a lot of pro-choice libertarians. Anybody who says I'm a conservative and pro-choice, you have to look very hard at what they think conservatism is, because it normally turns out to mean liberalism. So, by all means cooperate on policy. The world's an imperfect place. But when it comes to metaphysics, I think the two L's, by and large, are in a very different place than the C's. And for that reason, they're not one movement. The distinctions matter, they are useful, and they are enduring.
All right. Well, I hope that answers his question and that he knows how to plan his next dinner party. Right, folks, if you want to play along and ask your question of the professor, go to the URL on your screen and everything there will be explained. Thanks, and see you next time.